Hello everyone, it's Devin, and welcome back to another video, and we are halfway through 2019. It is the midpoint of the year, and so far this year there's been a lot of great music, a lot of great albums that I've reviewed, a lot of albums that I love, like that James Blake album, and the Wise Blood album, and the Ariana Grande album, and so on. But there are also a lot of really great albums that I didn't get a chance to talk about, and that is what I'm going to do in this video here. I'm going to take a little look back at some of the albums I've been listening to over the past 6 months, and throw some recommendations at y'all. So without further ado, I present 11 great albums that I didn't review in 2019. Why 11 and not 10 or 15 or something that makes sense? Because there were only 11 I really wanted to talk about, and like it's my channel, so like I don't... This is not a ranked list. I'm not going through these albums in order of like my least favorite to my most favorite. These are just 11 albums that I think are great and I recommend, and I'm just going through them in order of release date. That's all. Let's go! First up, the new spelling, that's spelling with 3 L's, the new spelling album, Mazy Fly, one of the most beautiful and thoroughly engrossing albums I've heard this year. Some awesome dark wave on this thing, such incredible atmosphere and textured kind of retro synths. This is such a gorgeous project through and through. It's also got quite a nice bit of variety in the dusty instrumentation, a lot of great tracks, but they all kind of come together to form a whole that I think is better than the sum of its parts. Some of my favorite singing of the year appears on this album. Like I said, super dark, beautiful, and occasionally kind of haunting album that stands as, in my opinion, easily one of the best of the year so far. Next we have an interesting and absolutely soul-crushing album in the new project album compilation from the Caretaker, Everywhere at the End of Time. Mr. Leland Kirby, aka the Caretaker, is a British electronic music producer, and oh my god, this is far and away the most ridiculously ambitious thing he's ever done. This is far and away one of the most unique listening experiences I've ever had, and easily the longest album I've ever listened to, by a pretty big margin. Because this album is 6.5 hours long. It is a sextuple disc album of thoroughly chilling, like turntable and plunderphonics music. Everywhere at the End of Time is an absolutely massive concept album that Leland Kirby has been releasing in pieces, in stages, for several years now. I believe part 1 actually came out in like 2016. However, I'm including it on this 2019 list because this year, in March, he released the final 6th part and finished the whole series and sextuple album. Like I said before, this is actually a concept album where each different stage of the album is supposed to represent a different stage of dementia and is supposed to just put you in the mind of a person whose brain is deteriorating. With no lyrics, just the use of samples and old records that have been stretched out and manipulated beyond recognition, Leland Kirby is able to convey an incredible array of emotions. From stage 1, which is like before the dementia has begun to set in and you're kind of in the last of the good days looking fondly back over your past, to stage 6 where it's just the absence of anything. I'm probably doing an absolutely horrific job of explaining this, and it is definitely not a project that is going to appeal to everyone because, like I said, it is ridiculously long. But having listened to all of it myself, I found it to be incredibly evocative, crushing, like soul-destroying, and easily maybe the most moving piece of music I've heard this year. If any of that sounds at all interesting to you, I implore you to give some of the stages of this album a shot, maybe the whole thing, because it's kind of hard for it to like not have some crazy impact on you. Next we have what is probably my favorite metal album of the year so far, the new Waste of Space Orchestra album, Syntheosis. This is such a crushingly heavy, freewheeling, and thoroughly exciting piece of metal music. I think that this band has done an amazing job of incorporating so many influences from so many different parts of metal music into this one project. You have some sludge metal and some drone metal, some like straight ambient music and kind of post-rock influences. Some of the tracks remind me a little bit of what Swans have been doing on their past few albums. But all of these different experiments and sounds kind of come together in an album that just feels more excitingly varied than it does disjointed, and a lot of that is because the production is extremely consistent throughout. This album just sounds so heavy, these riffs sound so thick and beefy, and I just love it. It's my favorite metal album of the year so far. Great project.
Sometimes shit seem out of reach, but when it do, I look down. See the glass on the ring, you look close, you could really see it pass on repeat. Tracing every step back like I'm dragging my feet.
Next we have another very interesting, thoroughly experimental album, and that is the new Slauson Malone project, A Quiet Farwell, 2016 to 2018. Title's a bit of a mouthful. This is an experimental hip-hop and sound collage album that is easily one of the most abstract, disorienting, and thoroughly strange listening experiences I've had this year. On this album, Slauson Malone has shown himself to be an incredible producer as he just assembles all of these incredible samples into these songs. And I say songs, but really they're more kind of like fragments of songs and interludes. This is an incredibly unorthodox album that just kind of does its own thing with its structure. Its aesthetic and kind of abstract edge reminds me a lot of the last Earl Sweatshirt album. I highly recommend that fans of that record check this album out, especially if you enjoyed the more weird aspects of that album. A bit like that Caretaker project, this is an album where it's very hard to explain why it's so good with words, even though this album is on a much smaller scale than that album. It's only a little bit over 30 minutes. But I do think the emotions that come through these fragmented songs are incredibly powerful, more powerful than I've heard on most albums this year. This album is often strange, sometimes disorienting, but in my opinion, always beautiful. The air up there is so fresh and clean. Up next, we have one of my favorite rock albums of the year, the new Fat White Family, that's a great band name, album, Surf's Up. This is a super compelling, sleazy, danceable, and depraved piece of art punk and post-punk. Compared to some of the band's previous work, this album is easily their most instrumentally rich and probably their best, as the songs on here are thoroughly groovy, again, just caked in sleaze, but when the band comes through with a super catchy chorus on this album, like on the song Tastes Good With The Money or Feet, these choruses really land. It's another record where I'm just hearing so many different influences all come together into one very compelling whole. It's easily one of the most interesting and memorable rock albums I've heard this year, and I totally recommend it.
I'm so icy, they keep on biting me. I was raised up in the jungle where they shoot at thieves. I was being in the summer without no sunscreen. I'm so super fragilistic, espialidocious.
Next, we have this new mixtape from Rico Nasty and Kenny Beats, very fittingly titled Anger Management. You may remember I put Rico's last project, Nasty, onto my favorite albums of 2018 video because I thought that was a super energetic, catchy, and just fun rap album that really left me super excited to see where Rico was going to go next, because I do think she really has some fire in her that few rappers can really compare to right now. Something I don't believe I said in that video is that most of my favorite Rico Nasty songs so far have been produced by Kenny Beats. So you can imagine my excitement when I heard that we were going to be getting a full collaborative mixtape with Rico Nasty and Kenny Beats co-starring. And I mean, now that I've heard it and I've been listening to it, it's just like I knew exactly what I was going to get going into this project, and oh boy, I got it, and that is some bangers. There's something about these two, just Rico and Kenny have such an incredible rapper-producer chemistry that few duos in hip-hop right now, in my opinion, can compare to. Kenny's beats are super distinct, loud, and just incredible, super entertaining, and Rico is just going crazy on like every song here, which there aren't too many of, because this tape is super short. It is only 9 tracks, 8 of which are songs, and it's only 18 minutes. However, unlike a lot of the other tapes and albums I've heard this year that are on the shorter side, Anger Management did not at all leave me like unsatisfied or underwhelmed. It's a tape that really worked well within its length and just did everything that it needed to and nothing it didn't. Really, the only parts of this album I didn't love were a few of the features, but everything that Rico and Kenny are doing on this tape is awesome. And I'm also super happy to see that Rico just made it onto the cover of the XXL freshman list, because I was rooting for her and she totally deserves it because she's making music like this. Next we have the new Otoboke Beaver album, ITEKOMA Hits. This is easily the most blisteringly fast, tight, and extremely entertaining punk record I've heard this year, and I have a feeling that I'm going to hear all year. Otoboke Beaver are a Japanese hardcore punk and riot girl band that actually formed in 2009, but this album, ITEKOMA Hits, is their first album, their debut. They've been releasing singles and stuff like that for years now, but this is the first time we're hearing them condensed into an album format. And wow, just hearing all of these songs one after another, it's like I'm just getting punched in the face over and over again, but it's good. The performances, the writing, the insane, loud, like, group vocals on almost every track here just create such an incredible dynamic. This band is tight as hell. If you're at all a fan of hardcore punk or even groups like Sleater-Kinney or Bikini Kill, definitely do not let this album pass you by, because this is maybe the best album we're gonna get in this style this year. Next up, we have the new album from one of my favorite bands, the new King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album, Fishing for Fishies. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, for those of you who don't know, are an amazing Australian 7-piece psychedelic rock band, but really they're whatever they want to be. At this point, they've made like metal albums and smooth jazz albums and psych rock albums and so many other albums. And like I said, this project here is their newest album. Fishing for Fishies is a super fun, catchy, kind of cute, and eco-friendly blues rock album. There's so many wonderful, well-produced, and catchy blues songs on here. The song Psy Boogie, the lead single, is one of my favorite singles of the year, and I don't mean to flex, but you know I had to cop that 7-inch. Again, if you haven't listened to this band, please check them out, because I just cannot say enough nice things about this weird, wild, and wonderful group, and this is, in traditional King Gizzard fashion, not the only album they're releasing this year. They have a thrash metal album coming out very soon, which I'm very excited for, but until that album comes out, I will be getting my King Giz fix with Fishing for Fishies.
Yeah, humble as a mumble in the jungle, you dig? Can't never knock the hustle, get that shit how you live.
Next, we have the new Injury Reserve album, self-titled Injury Reserve. Injury Reserve is a hip-hop trio that I've been watching ever since I heard their Floss mixtape back in 2016, which is a great project. But now they're here with what I believe is actually their major label debut album, this new self-titled record here. And I mean, as much as I love this group's mixtapes, I think with this album they've really, like, hit their stride and struck something truly incredible, as this is easily one of the best rap albums of the year. This thing is so creative in terms of production, it is so clever and occasionally funny, but it also, like those other tapes, strikes a nice balance between having these super energetic, super catchy songs, and also moments of real, like, introspection. Some of the most introspective rap lyrics I've heard this year appear on this album. And I just love on every tape and album and song we hear from these guys, they just come through with such a sense of, like, unity and brotherhood. A ton of my favorite rap songs of the year are on this album, songs like GTFU and Jailbreak the Tesla and 3-Man Weave. Again, super catchy album of experimental and industrial hip-hop that you should not miss.
Is it easy to keep so quiet? Everybody loves a quiet child. Underwater you're almost free. If you wanna be alone, come with me.
Next we have the new album by The National, the album I Am Easy to Find, which might just be this group's most desolate album yet. and that's saying a lot. This easily stands as one of the most sublime and beautiful alternative rock albums I've heard this year. I love the implementation of female vocals into a lot of these songs. And, you know, while this isn't far from a catchy record, I do think the emotions on display on this album are super palpable and super moving in pieces. This is definitely going to appeal to a listener who is willing to maybe be a little bit more patient and kind of take their time with this album, because I do think upon repeated listens it does kind of reveal its inner beauty and all of its secrets to you. Again, beautiful album. I don't have a ton to say about it other than that it is just a great and beautiful piece of alternative rock. And last but not least, we have the new comeback album from Rammstein, Untitled. I think it's Untitled. I've seen some people refer to it as a self-titled album, but I'm gonna go with Untitled. Rammstein, beloved industrial metal band, maybe the biggest and most widely celebrated band to ever come out of Germany. These guys had a ton of hit albums and singles in the 90s and 2000s, but until the release of this new album here, it had been 10 years since the last Rammstein record. But now that I've heard this new Untitled album, I can comfortably say I think they've returned pretty much without skipping a beat. This is just Rammstein commencing business as usual 10 years later, which is not a bad thing because Rammstein is great. There are just so many incredible arena-ready industrial pop metal anthems across this album, tracks like Deutschland and Radio and Zeig. I do think this band has really come through with one of the better comeback albums of the year, and definitely one of my favorite metal albums of the year. This thing is just so like, the writing here is so good. These songs are so catchy and memorable, and the production is great. The performances are all fantastic throughout. It's an album that I just can't put down, and I will most likely be returning to throughout the rest of the year. And yeah, those are all of the albums. 11 great albums from this year so far that I think you should listen to. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Really appreciate all the support, and I'm gonna go now because it is super hot in this room and I need to turn on the air conditioning. So thank you, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Goodbye!